Greetings from the People's Dispatch studios in New Delhi. I'm Siddhantani and you're watching Daily Debrief. First up, the South China Sea. Addressing the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, US President Joe Biden talked about some of the pet themes in the regions. One of the usual terms used by Biden in his address mentioned upholding freedom of the seas and commerce as a challenge he wishes to address alongside ASEAN member nations. The concept of freedom of the seas, though, has acquired a different connotation when used by the US in recent times. NewsClick Editor-in-Chief Prabir Purkayastha joins us to talk about this issue. Prabir, first question, how has the US in the recent past been characterizing disputes over the seas? And in the context of Southeast Asia, why is this important?
Of course, the issue is the containment of China. That's a larger issue. And the United States has argued that this is a part of what its documents and strategic vision is, that the need to control the Chinese waters, even when what is called the first line of islands. There is this 3 lines of islands. And of course, the first line of islands is the closest to China. And they said, within that, we need to control it. At the moment, China has more control over it than we have. So that's a larger part of the strategic vision. And of course, China would not like the United States to be controlling its sea up to its coastline, which is what, again, the US position seems to be. So that has been the conflict, and South China Sea manifests itself in that context differently because it also has other littoral countries, those who also are abutting the South China Sea, which is Philippines, Indonesia, various other countries which are there in the region. Now, this, of course, has different connotation for them and for the United States, and they have articulated this. In 2017, they had a conference of the countries of the region, not China, but all the other ones. And they came to the conclusion that what the other countries who are extraterritorial, means they do not belong to the region, talk about the freedom of navigation and what Biden has talked about, commerce, is different from what they're talking about. Because for them, the trade with the ASEAN countries or the Southeast Asian countries is with Northeast and Eastern countries of Asia. So they're really talking about Japan, South Korea, and China. And 80 to 85% of this trade is probably with China as of now. So given that, their argument is that when people talk about freedom of navigation or freedom of the seas, that they have a different interpretation than what we have. We are talking about what our littoral states' control over these seas should be. And our difference with China, to put it very diplomatically, is over who gets what. So if we're talking about fishing rights, you're talking about undersea resources, so mineral resources, that is one set of issues on which we have difference with China. But on the issue of what rights littoral states should have and extraterritorial rights, those who do not belong to this region, what they should have are completely different. So their argument, given diplomatically, is a 2017 document which they had prepared, is that other countries who are talking about freedom of navigation are talking about extra legal rights that they have over the South China Sea. What we are talking about is our rights and who gets what in this region. So there are 2 different kinds of debates that are there. There are 2 kinds of, their disputes with China is about we also have fishing rights here. We also have sea rights over here. And that is not covered under the freedom of seas that the US is talking about or the freedom of commerce, which is really Southeast Asian commerce with China. And how does US therefore come in is an open question.
So how does this sort of fit in with the larger policy of encirclement that the US is employing in terms of China?
So while it is couched in terms of freedom of navigation, etc., or even of commons and so on, the real issue, as we know, is the US pivot to Asia, which is what Obama has talked about. And the fact that with the fall of Afghanistan, that the US has lost out in Afghanistan, the fact that it is probably on the verge of withdrawing from Iraq and possibly from the Syrian, little parts of Syria that they have occupied, that you are really seeing a larger pivot of the US away from West Asia and Central Asia, because the gateway to Central Asia for them was Afghanistan. So given that, the pivot to Asia is really pivot to Southeast Asia. And the battle of the over Southeast Asia is, in their view, with China, how to contain China. And that also explains the AUKUS treaty, where they're trying to get Australia into it. Australia could be considered a continent or that a slightly bigger island of Southeast Asia. So that's what it really is. And the fact that they have got into this kind of agreement, I don't think UK counts seriously, because it's a fading colonial, ex-colonial power. So the fact that they have brought this in seems to be more as a military containment strategy. And also in play is Southeast Asia, probably the most fast developing region in the world today economically, and is also expanding its economic ties with Japan, Korea, but of course with China. So I think that is where the play seems to be, as a part of, as you were talking about, a military containment of China. And that, India is not a major player in this, because I don't think the US troops can come and fight our battles. We are fighting our battles ourselves. So India and China have a different battle that they are facing across in terms of the border. But when it comes to Indo-Pacific, or the ocean and the seas that we are talking about, that's really about Southeast Asia. And I think that's the real battle when you talk about freedom of navigation, freedom of commerce, as Biden was saying. It fits in with this larger issue of containment of China, but it's really focused at the moment, I think, on Southeast Asia.
We're sticking to the Southeast Asian region for our next story. Activists in Thailand are renewing the demand to do away with the country's controversial and stringent lèse-majesté laws that criminalize insult or defamation to the royal family. On Wednesday, a group of activists approached a parliamentary committee petitioning for the repeal of Section 112 of the country's criminal code, which deals with these laws. This petition is the latest in the push to bring back a demand that began the pro-democracy movement in Thailand. We're also playing a bit of musical chairs on the show. Anish is now joining us. Anish from People's Dispatch covers Thailand quite closely. Anish, what's the latest from the ground?
So yesterday, as you said, there was a group of activists who brought in a petition for the first time. It's not actually the first time, but first time since the latest round of protests that began under the government of Prayuth Chan-o-cha. And in that, it is like part of a larger process that is already happening from different groups across Bangkok, right now Bangkok, who are demanding for the repeal of this law. Now, this law you have to understand, because we are talking about Thailand, which is, at least on paper, it's a constitutional democracy with a constitutional monarchy. But this is the most stringent, the harshest of laws in the world right now, harsher than what Saudi Arabia has or Brunei has, which are absolute monarchies. So in that sense, we're talking about 15 years of maximum prison sentence, 3 years of minimum prison sentence. And these laws also kind of encourage vigilantism, because anybody can report people or just file complaints. Not even like report people. They can just really just petition complaints against people who think are insulting the monarchy. And we need to also understand that over the past year or so, the number of cases that have been filed against activists who are asking for not abolition of the monarchy, we have to understand that. This is only reform of the monarchy and how monarchy is managed in the country. And even those people are being charged. Yeah, exactly. And many of them are arrested. And these are non-bailable offenses. So it is quite a difficult scenario. It is part of the larger political repression that is also happening in Thailand, especially since the protests broke out last year in July, August, demanding. It began with, obviously, the lèse-majesté laws, but it also expanded to other issues, as we know, regarding political democracy in the country. It is now a nominal democracy. There were elections, but we know that it was manipulated. There is also a situation where the military has significant control over the government through the Senate. It also has significant control over the civil society and, labor codes, all of that. So it expanded into an issue that encompasses everything that is wrong with Thailand as such.
Right.
So bringing back this issue, which began as a university protest in Thammasat last year, we are looking at the situation where the protest movements are trying to renew themselves, because there has been, as you know, a sort of lull in the protest and lull in the movement that really needs to be, that is really trying to pick up.
Revitalized.
Yeah. And in that process, we are looking at activists coming up, bringing out the number of cases. It has been 150 since November last year. Before that, there were obviously dozens of other cases. Many of these same people are being charged with other charges like sedition, cyber crimes, stuff like that. And so many of them are looking at like decades in prison of maximum sentence. So in that manner, this becomes quite significant right now.
Right. You were also telling me earlier that there are several class groups that are involved in the protest, and they have several different demands, obviously. Can you give us a sort of a picture of who these groups are and what they're asking for?
Yeah, so it obviously began as a movement for the reform of the monarchy. You have to also understand, like, the monarchy is quite an opaque institution in Thailand. The finances are not really public. You cannot really get estimates of how much expenses the royal family incurs on the state. There is also a situation where the monarchy also controls sections, small sections, but sections of the army itself directly. And this is something that came up after the coup in 2014. So after the 2017 new constitution came up, Prayut Chan-o-cha actually gave 2 units of the army and as part of the royal barracks, and that is completely under the control of the monarchy itself. And apart from that, students have been calling for political democracy in the country, which they see as an essential part of their freedom of expression. But apart from the students' movement, you also have trade unions coming in. You also have social movements which are actually demanding an end to the cycle of military having the upper hand all the time. Because whenever there has been democratic elections, you have had situations where kind of progressive governments coming up and them being taken down every time they threaten the military's control over government or the political system as such. So this has something, this has also expanded to a situation where you do not have a unified tendency right now in the movement. You also can see for the past 2 months now, or 3 months actually, where Bangkok is kind of swept away with protests almost every day right now, but by different groups in a different manner, completely disorganized, but you will always have like hundreds of people coming in, participating. So it also shows a certain amount of anger on the part of the people. Elections are obviously still far ahead, but still you have a certain number of anger and dissent on the ground right now, and it comes in different forms, right? So that is, it is always very difficult to pinpoint which group exactly. Nobody really cares to call themselves as the true representative of the movement. But definitely it's a movement towards democratization. That is the more unifying aspect of it. Because it's not, even if it's just reforming the monarchy, it is about democratizing the situation, right? To bring them, make them accountable to the people. So that is a movement that is trying to revitalize and become, come back to its more essentials.
Good to have you on the show, Anish. And finally, we're talking about Elon Musk, who's already the world's richest person with an estimated wealth of 241 billion US dollars. He could now, analysts are suggesting, become the first trillionaire. Analysts at investment bank Morgan Stanley have predicted this or put out this report. Musk has, of course, made most of his money from the electric car company Tesla, but seems in line for even more speculative gains from his fledgling space exploration business, SpaceX. Bapa Sinha, our resident tech expert, is in the house. Bapa, how does one become a trillionaire?
Seriously, I mean, most of Musk's wealth comes from Tesla, right? So he owns roughly, like, I think 22-23% of Tesla, and Tesla became a $1 trillion company. So that itself accounts for, I guess, like $220 billion of his wealth. And now people are saying that SpaceX may very well be even more valuable than Tesla. And so if SpaceX were to become a $1 trillion company, then Musk may be halfway to becoming a trillionaire.
Yeah. And considering Tesla doesn't actually make that many cars, what is this $1 trillion valuation that you're talking about? What is it really based on? And how does it compare with other $1 trillion companies, let's say?
Yeah, so Tesla's $1 trillion valuation is difficult to justify. So if you look at the other $1 trillion companies, they're all tech companies, with the exception of the Saudi oil company, Aramco. The remaining ones are Apple, Microsoft, Google, not Facebook. Facebook used to be, but have dropped out recently, and Amazon, right? So, and these companies, like for example, when Apple became a $1 trillion company, Apple had like 230 billion dollars in revenues, right? When Facebook became a $1 trillion company, it has now dropped off. But when it became a $1 trillion company, it had $85 billion in revenue. Tesla only has $30 billion in revenue. Right. So it's a very steep valuation, right? And Tesla is more valued than the next, than the top 10 automakers in the world combined. So that includes names like BMW, Mercedes, Volkswagen, General Motor, all the big companies, some of the Chinese companies, Toyota. While Tesla produces about 1% of the total cars that are produced in the world, right? So why would it be so highly valued? Even if you were to make the claim that we are eventually moving to electric cars, the key component of an electric car is the battery. That's what distinguishes one electric car from another. And Tesla really doesn't make the battery technology. The Chinese are ahead on the battery technologies, and the Chinese produce 80% of all electric car batteries. So why Tesla would be so highly valued? It's an interesting question. And I mean, some of it is because of Musk's personality, right? Where he seems to have this ability to influence people manipulate people through social media.
Last question, Baba. SpaceX, where is the scope for making money there?
So there are two things, right? SpaceX has made some technological breakthroughs in space technology. There is some talk about them having these reusable rockets and them making it fairly stable. But the other avenue is by having a monopoly on the US market. So there is a legislation where Russian rocket engines are going to be banned from American launches. So as of now, American launches, including military launches, use Russian rockets. So Americans are incapable of producing that technology. So SpaceX lobbied the Congress, the US Congress, very heavily to ban Russian rockets from 2019. Now, interestingly, the current suppliers of rocket parts is a collaboration between Lockheed Martin and Boeing, and Boeing lobbied against that, and so they have got a temporary extension till 2025. But let's say the ban comes to effect in 2025, then Tesla will have a monopoly on all US launches. And that is going to be a significant market, right? There are military launches, there are communication satellites, there are surveillance satellites. So that's a significant market. And if Tesla has a monopoly on that market, that would be a valuable company.
Right. So the Elon Musk way is the way to go if you're into that kind of scene. Anyway, that does it for our show today. You've been watching Daily Debrief, presented by People's Dispatch. You can follow us on all the usual social media channels and visit our website, peoplesdispatch.org. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again, same time, same place tomorrow.